We got to come back to the ATP piece. You mentioned quickly there the fact that it's not the energy currency of the body, which science has, it's a common understanding within the scientific world that it is. Talk about how you see that.
This is something I discuss in detail in my most recent book I came out with back in August. It's called Pain Sense, where I talk about a chronic pain epidemic. But yeah, there's this, we're all taught in, 8th grade biology that the goal of the mitochondria is to make ATP, and ATP is the energy currency of the body. However, there are issues with that in that this one scientist, many scientists actually, but mainly this scientist named Gilbert Ling, experimentally and mathematically proved that I don't care how many mitochondria you have in a cell, there's no way that it could make enough ATP to power just the sodium potassium pump, if the sodium potassium pump even exists. And he was like, there's just no way to make that much. And especially like during cell division, that's said to take up 40% of the cell's energy to do that. How is it supposed to do that if it can't even make enough to power the sodium potassium pump? And it's because energy is stored in ATP. There is an energy bond in the chemical energy bond that is storing energy in ATP. But all it's really used for is to unfold proteins in the cell. So, think of so what does structured water need? Like all of our cells are made of structured water, right? That's why we feel like a gel if I poke myself. And what structured water needs is energy, an energy source. It needs surface area, right? It needs a spot to a hydrophilic surface to deposit itself on and become structured water. And so if you roll up a ball of tinfoil real tight, that's a very small surface area. But if you unfold that tinfoil, you create a lot of surface area. And so ATP's job, the reason we pass electrons down an electron transport train and then pass hydrogens the other way and go to complex 5 and make ATP, is so that those ATP can unfold proteins. Because when they unfold proteins, water structures on it. And that's where the energy for our bodies is held, in structured water. It's very electronegatively charged. So when you think about building structured water, you're charging your body like a battery. Remember, I told you structured water creates a battery. It creates this thing that does work in the body. And so that's where it's being stored. So ATP is still critical because we need surface area to build structured water. But it's not the energy currency of the cell. And then further from that, there's Gilbert Ling also has his association induction hypothesis, which basically explains that, because they've done experiments where you remove the cell membrane of a cell and the solute distribution. Anybody who's familiar with cellular physiology knows that the potassium is concentrated inside the cell and sodium is concentrated outside the cell. And we talked about how exclusion zone water excludes anything that's sodium or bigger and includes, and things that are potassium and smaller can get in, right? And that's exactly what we see. Potassium and chloride are inside the cell and sodium is excluded outside the cell. And when they did experiments where they removed the cell membrane, it stayed exactly that way because the structured water is still there. And the cell membrane is just there kind of, I guess, holding it in a somewhat structure, right? And so that's how we get this solute distribution. And then Gerald Pollack wrote this fascinating book called Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life that explains how, like what we think of as an action potential that does physiology, that triggers for physiology in the body, or the trigger of a cell to divide or do cellular physiology, is all driven by what he calls phase transitions, which is basically, think of phases of water. It's the structured water going back to a liquid state. And that creates a decreased voltage for a second because the voltage is held by the structured water. You lose the structured water, you lose the charge, and then it comes back. And right, that change in voltage triggers for cell division and for protein making and all this different stuff. It provides the energy to do that, the signals for that. He talks about how phase transitions are responsible for muscle contraction and all these different things. So it's an entirely different framework of looking at physiology, but it makes sense when you look at the big picture of how life is on the planet. We're all trying to gain energy and we're trying to store that energy in structured water. And we need other things to do that, but that's what provides the energy for life. And so why are we sick? We've removed ourselves from those energy sources, added things that interfere with or that insult the energy source. And then once the damage has happened, we've interfered with the body's ability to heal from it through disrupted circadian rhythm and poor metabolic health. There it is right there.
Can we measure structured water at all?
I don't know about in the body, but I know that in Dr. Pollock's lab, they've measured like the amount that will form, on a hydrophilic surface, and they've taken different things to make it build more and measured how much it will build it. Far infrared light was the best at doing it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess by proxy, you could look at markers of inflammation. Inflammation is just low body charge, in my opinion. Inflammation just means too much, like we've lost our alkalinity. You can, like, there's tons of studies that show that a change in pH of an area is an indication of inflammation. So when the cell loses its slightly alkaline pH, which means alkaline means a little bit more negative, which means less structured water. You've lost your alkalinity. So that's what inflammation is. So markers of inflammation could be an indication that you're losing or you have low structured water in your body. I mean, you could say an erythrocyte sedimentation rate, where you look at that and the red blood cells are clumped together. There's low charge there, right? There's not enough charge to keep the red blood cells evenly spaced. You could consider that by proxy, a measure of structured water. But yeah, there's no like device that will measure the structured water in you. But actually, that's how MRIs work. They align the water molecules in a way that they can take an image through it. And like Gilbert Ling's work with structured water is what led to the development of MRI machine. And he was like, "Are you not interested in like the other things that this shows us?" And they're like, "No, we just want to make an MRI machine. Thanks." That's the story he tells in one of his books. So yeah.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
Life is just all about harvesting energy from the environment and using it to create order. And if you don't have enough energy in the system to maintain the order, you get disease. Things start to break down. And so the first place that the body seems to sacrifice is the lining of the arteries.